Hello, Paul Johnson here for Film Obsessive, and today I am with Zayn Alexandre. Zayn is the director, the producer, and the writer of the short film Saint Rose. It premieres next month at the 2024 Red Sea International Film Festival. And Zayn, I'm very pleased to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
I'm eager to talk about your film. Can you tell our audience a little bit about the basic situation and characters in Saint Rose?
Sure. Saint Rose is a short film, like you said. It is a Lebanese short film that I shot back in the summer of last year in Lebanon. And it is it's sort of a character portrait of a housewife who is coping with the confinement of her marriage and the expectations within a conservative society and how she sort of navigates those struggles and yeah, I can't say too much without revealing too much, but it's a subtle film, inspired by, of course, my life growing up in southern Lebanon. I was born and raised in Lebanon, moved to the United States at 21, so I had 20 years of observations and sort of memories that that uh, just finally ready to tell a story about some of the things that I experienced growing up in a female-dominated household, and Saint Rose is one of many stories to come, I hope so.
It sounds fascinating. I'm eager to hear a little bit more, if you will, just about your origins and what the seed was for Saint Rose in particular in telling this woman's story on screen.
Sure. You know, I it's tricky to talk about this because, part of it is personal, part of it is like critique on society and given what's happening around the world. You don't want to sound too negative, but, there is a bit, I think that critique of society where you grew up, I think is partly based off of frustration and love at the same time with a place and culture that you want to see treat people with justice. And I think what drives me a lot of the time is what makes me angry is injustice. And when I see people around me being treated unfairly, um, it just I don't know, it fuels something within. And now I have the privilege of making films and telling stories and writing about them. And I think, I grew up in a female-dominated household. I grew up seeing my mom and my sister and my aunt, and my dad's side of the family is predominantly women. So I see the difference in treatment and roles and role assignment and what is expected of people, and how one particular gender, if I may say, is has way more freedom in terms of behavior and what they want, how they express their desires and their movements, and another doesn't. I grew up in, let's say, I see my mother going out, and there's always, what time are you going to be back? Oh, you're 2 minutes late. And I would see her face. I would see the tension. I would feel everything that everybody was feeling, and I just sort of never quite understood. I think till this very day, there's some pockets in the world where that still exists. But the film itself, I don't want to stop me if I
Yeah.
speak too much because I'm trying to relate it to the film. The film itself came from one vivid memory um, during my sister's engagement, and my mother was squeezing oranges, making orange juice for hundreds of people, and I just didn't understand why we weren't buying freshly made orange juice from the store, because that was the expectation um, set by the patriarch in the family and my dad. Um, and all of a sudden, sort of seeing him morph into a host, and she's the assistant. Meanwhile, it's her turf, and she's hosting, and she's supposed to be celebrating her daughter, my sister. Um, but it was interesting how he just sort of wanted to be the star of the evening, and my mother sort of slid into the background after she did all the work, and there was an expectation of what kind of manual labor that needed to be done. And that stayed with me. That particular image stayed with me, and that was the genesis of Saint Rose, and that particular scene with the orange juice, and kind of was the foundation of the entire film. So
Yeah, there's really two central characters in Saint Rose. One of those is the matriarch who you speak of, and whom I'm assuming here is modeled to a degree after your mother. And I'm just wondering if making a film in which a stand-in character for your own mother is like a pivotal, the protagonist essentially of the film, if that's something that you need then to negotiate and discuss and work through with your own family.
Well, here's the thing. The actress is my mother. Yes. So you
That
know,
is a negotiation.
that is a negotiation. Of course, it's difficult because you're tapping into deeply personal issues. But I think for me, the decision. I like to work with family. I know I like to work with people there's incredible familiarity with because I know what I can bring from them on camera. And she was okay, she was game. And I said, this is what we're trying to do. And I don't want you to be too self-conscious about it. And I don't want you to think about who's going to see this and who's not going to see this. And she was game and she's incredibly supportive. And this was an important story, but this is not something that she just experienced or still experiences. I mean, the film is dedicated to a dear friend of hers and our family who went through similar situations, and it felt there was a responsibility to tell the story, to honor her spirit. And so yeah, the what was the question? Because I feel like I veered into different territory when I talked about the
Well,
cast.
I was just curious to what extent you would need to kind of negotiate terms of meaning and content with your own family as you're
Yeah.
developing the script.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think there wasn't much of a negotiation with my dad. It was like, we're shooting a film, deal with it. You're in it. Well, sort of. You're inferred, but yeah, no, I think that it was difficult tapping into those personal sort of emotions and the genesis of it all. And Sharon, who plays Becky in the film, was also incredibly, um, empathetic, and she had incredible access to the character. And I sat them down. I said, "This is the story," and I did a little bit of rehearsals, but I could immediately see the intuitive choices that they're making, and I felt like I rehearsing too much would be counterproductive, and I just let them, you know, I
Yeah,
just let
did
them
you did
be.
you go through anything equivalent to a traditional casting process there, or did
No.
you you have these two women in mind right from the start, and
Yep.
they are going to be playing the characters?
Yep. Yeah. I usually it's that. I There was no traditional casting process. It's I have this idea. I'd like you to be part of it. Let's see what we can do. I rehearse a little bit. I see if I can get what I need and what feels right. And if I do, I'll just take the risk on the day, and we just, all pressure's off, and it's just focusing in the moment. And working with non-actors is challenging, but also is liberating in a way because um, they're not necessarily worried about their marks, and they're not, and it's
Mhm.
it's it's what comes in intuitively to them that is also equally powerful. So,
I'm curious, and I apologize if this seems like a little bit of a stray comment, but I'm just very curious to know who some of your favorite filmmakers are. Are there other directors, filmmakers who you see mining similar territory, or whose working methods or maybe treatments you admire?
oh God, this question. It's a very long list, and for me, I mean, I love the work of Almodovar and Farhadi and Coen brothers. I love the Dardennes. There's
Right.
so many filmmakers. There's so many films. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily drawn to a particular style as much as I'm drawn to a story or an actor's commitment in a story, or I just uh, uh, there's so many. It's a very long list, but I, if you've seen my previous films, there's a constant theme. There's always one location. There's always very minimal characters, and for me, that's that's not necessarily dictated by the structure, which is, oh, we're working in a short film format, we're working with a limited budget and minimal resources. I enjoy telling a story in a confined setting. For me, it's freeing to use the space and seeing what kind of how the story particularly unfolds within that space. And I'm drawn to that. I'm really drawn to the human condition, what's not said, what is inferred, and Saint Rose is a bit, I think, is a bit subtle as well in that sense because it's it's about the behavior, it's about what is not being said, it's about there's the emotion behind, again, what's not being said. I keep saying that, but yeah. So I hope that answers your question, but there's just a
It
lot of
does, and I was thinking a little bit in terms of maybe Douglas Sirk, or following him, Rainer Werner Fassbinder, also filmmakers who really love that notion of the enclosed, constricted, almost kind of claustrophobic space at times, and the mise en scène still being very rich and very informative. I was also going to comment on the beautiful set that you have and the way it was lit and shot so beautifully and aesthetically, clearly very intentionally as well. And I wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about first the set where you shot St. Rose, and then also what you needed to do to make the set look like it looks, almost as another character on screen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, we're working with amazing people like our DP, Karim Asim, who is um, really just incredibly talented and brought a very nuanced touch to the story. And Yasmina Zaidan, who's our incredible art director, who, I think it's tricky when with Lebanese cinema, we there's a class divide in Lebanon that is very nuanced with, you know, the majority of the population is a middle class family or middle class families who um it's I believe they can be categorized as discreetly wealthy, which is there's a very polished veneer, but it's not really it doesn't necessarily symbolize grandness or wealth. It's a veneer where, yes, it looks grand, but the walls are cracked. Sorry about the noise. Um, the walls are cracked, the paint is cracked. There's great taste, but there is foundational um there's it's fractured when it comes to the foundation and the infrastructure. And so this is what I really wanted to highlight. Um and also I think it's about Rose's relationship to her setting, her bathroom and her relationship to that um, was important to sort of highlight as well, and why that is considered sort of a getaway place for her, and also how that home, even though it's her turf and it's where she feels like she can be herself, it's also a prison. And the kitchen scene and the bathroom scene, the windows are small, there's bars on the windows, and I think it's we work together with a great team to sort of amplify those elements in a way.
But it is I mean, it is a small bathroom. I'm also just curious a little bit about
Mhm.
what it takes to get your crew in there as
Oh
well
yeah.
as the cast and conduct the shoot. That to me sounds like it must have been a little complicated as well.
Yeah, we were in the bathtub, sort of all of us sort of cramped in the tub, and it was, yeah, one of the joys of of filming is to really just kind of get the shot and the magic of cinema really and cheat, technically speaking. But yeah, no, it definitely, confined spaces, but you make it work when you work with great people and you forget the technical component. You just really focus on what's in front of you. So
This is a proof of concept film. You're looking at this story for elaborating at some point in the future. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Saint Rose. Yeah, I've been developing my feature for quite a while now, and it's in the late development stages. And Saint Rose is a little microcosm of that feature. It's a story of one particular character that I chose to focus on, that also has very similar characteristics and a very similar arc in the feature.
Okay.
And yeah, so I'm excited to sort of bring that to life very soon, I hope. And it's a very special project, and I was very happy to have this script be selected at the TIFF Filmmaker Lab a couple years ago, and then won Best Pitch at the Reykjavik International Film Festival. And then so it's been no really, very proud of the journey so far, and hope to bring it to life soon. Yeah.
That is exciting. I hope we get to have another conversation about that film sometime in the future. So, in the meantime,
I hope so too.
it's at Red Sea International Film Festival next month. Is that correct?
December, yeah, December 9th is the world premiere of Saint Rose, at the Red Sea International Film Festival in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And yeah, I'm excited to share it, and also a little anxious, to see what people think. And it's always nerve-wracking to share work, because it's a very vulnerable place to be. But I'm not in it. I acted in my previous film, so this is the first film I didn't sort of I didn't have an acting role in, so I don't get to see myself up there, which is nice. So I get to just kind of enjoy the experience with everybody else.
Nonetheless, I'm pretty confident it's going to be a treat for the audience there. And then, what's next for you? Continued work on the feature film? Do you have other projects that you're working on?
Yeah, the feature is my main focus right now, touring with the short, and then making the feature.
All right. The film again is Saint Rose. The director, writer, and producer of the film is Zayn Alexandre. It premieres next month at the 2024 Red Sea International Film Festival. Zayn, thank you for taking the time to talk with us at Film Obsessive today.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate this. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.